by a bent line, by a straight line, by a crooked line. The Crooked Path, a podcast for modern cunning folk with Peter Pagan.
Hello and welcome to The Crooked Path. My name is Peter Pagan, and this week we're taking a look at Walpurgisnacht. But first, here's a little bit of news. So, we will, as usual, be vending at the Melrose Trading Post at Taft Charter High School in Woodland Hills this Saturday. We were there last Saturday too. Where were you all? It was bloody hot and nobody was buying anything, but we were there anyway, sitting and dozing in the sunlight. We won't be vending at the Northridge Farmers Market. Our attempt to do so there was a bit of a fracas due to the fact that it wasn't very well organised, and even though we'd reserved a space, we ended up not getting to vend there, so we won't be going back. But we will be looking at some other spots to do vending. Mama Star has a new book out, the Old Style Conjure Wisdoms, Workings and Remedies book, which is available on Amazon. It will be made available very shortly on Kindle and the other electronic formats, so keep an eye out for it. It's a fun book of daily affirmations. And if you enjoy our fiction books, Bird of Paradise, which was our first title under our new imprint Excaliban, is now available on Kindle for the princely sum of $4.99. So if you've been holding off on buying that until you could get it on your electronic device, now you can. And the other ebook versions will be following suit in the near future. And that's it for the news. So, we're talking about the Walpurgisnacht, which is the German for the night of St. Walpurgis, or Walpurgis, depending on how you want to pronounce her name. She was an abbess in London, and she was made into a saint, and this is the eve of her Saint's Day. It is famous for the Witch's Flight, which is an interesting event where witches ride their broomsticks through the night to take part in a grand sabbat. In German folklore, Walpurgisnacht is believed to be the night of a witches' meeting on the Brocken Mountain, and to this day there is still a Walpurgisnacht gathering on the Brocken Mountain. These days it looks a bit more like a rave. All the trendy young things go and boogie their brains out, and each other's brains out, no doubt, and rather than naked witches flying on broomsticks, it's hipsters and laser beams, but it's all a lot of good, clean fun. And basically, the idea is a grand sabbat, and everyone jumps on their broomsticks and flies to the top of the mountain to cavort with the devil or to battle demons, depending on which version of the story that you read. And it has a lot of similarities with the old Strega tradition of the witches flying to the top of Benevento, Mount Benevento, for pretty much the same purpose. And it is a night that is considered to be one of the most infamous. The church is very not happy with the concept of Walpurgisnacht. They're not happy with Beltane, which is the following day, either, but Walpurgisnacht is supposed to be the evil, sinister, the evil twin of Beltane. Beltane is all about going off into the woods and fornicating like rabbits. Walpurgisnacht, according to most fundamentalist Christians, is the night when we make our ointments out of baby fat and eat small children and drink blood and do more fornicating, but with demons this time, apparently. Of course, none of that is true. We don't really like children enough to want to eat them and make ointments out of their fat. we'd rather use herbal products because they don't scream and poop during the preparation process. So, so now you know the truth. The real truth behind vegetarianism in paganism is because we were tired of screaming babies. I'm gonna pay so bad for that one. It's a night for wild cavorting and deep magic, and being the eve before Beltane, it is a time when the veil is very thin, much like at Samhain, and it is a time when the fairy folk are about. So it's a night for mischief, and in its modern incarnation, a lot of witchcraft traditions use it as a night for encountering your own inner demons and coming to terms with them. In the traditional celebrations in Germany, they tend to run around with spoons banging on things to scare away the demons and the witches. But originally it would have been a matter of actually encountering and taking care of your demons, acknowledging them and taking ownership of them, and then reabsorbing them and transmuting the negative energy into something more positive. And that's what a lot of people in this day and age do in the witchcraft community. Meanwhile, the people that flock to Mount Brocken in Germany still take their spoons and bang on things and have a good old time. They also probably bang on each other and drink large quantities of alcohol too, because why else would they be there? As I said, it's kind of like a giant rave now. So that's the lore stuff, the background. There's not an awful lot. If you look online, you'll see a lot of websites that tell you basically the same little piece of information. It is the infamous Night of the Grand Sabbath in a lot of Christian propaganda stuff. It's the night when everyone performs the osculum infame, kissing the devil's butt, and stuff like that. They have wonderful imaginations, these fundamentalist Christians. What can I say? I've been drinking too much of the communion wine, I think. So let's move on to some practice, shall we? Comes to practical witchcraft work, Walpurgisnacht is all about the besom. Working with a besom is one of the trademark things that a witch is supposed to do according to all the stereotypes. And so I thought that it would be a good idea to look at some of the uses of the besom. And the first thing I'd like to do is very simple. It's how to make one. And luckily, I don't have to run around trying to do so right now, because here's some video I actually made several years ago on how to make a traditional witch's besom. Gathered here today for the committing of a broomage, otherwise known as a besomy.
No besom.
So
I'll be the queen bees.
First thing you have to do is take the traditional hard involved plastic cable ties. Now in olden days, the broom squire would have had a broom saw, which is like a bench, a long bench with a clamp at one end that's operated by a foot lever. Mm-hmm. And the clamp had circular jaws, so you could grab the birch in the jaws and hold it nice and tight while you wrapped the withies on it. Mm. Now, I don't have one, and whilst I figured out how to build one, I've got neither the time nor the space to build one, right. So I've decided to go for a modern variation. So this is Broom Squire's sawhorse, believe it or not. And this is almost traditional. Mm. This is the poke, and what happens for that is, if you imagine this is the willow withies, you push it under the withies that you've wrapped, and it creates a gap that you can push the ends through to tie them off. So it's a very useful tool. It would have been used let me try that again in English. It would have been made out of a goose bone, the thigh bone of a goose, traditionally. But I didn't happen to have a goose drumstick knocking around,
No.
so I used a copper pipe.
I love a gamey anyway.
The other thing that we're going to use that's non-traditional is a pair of pruning shears, because the broom squire, after he'd bound the birch, would have taken a machete type blade or an axe if he was really desperate and level off the end. And I can't do that because I don't have either an axe or a machete, so I'm going to prune it, which is a little slower, but saves having to...
You actually do have a machete somewhere.
Yeah, but I don't think it's going to be good for this. Alright, traditionally, it's 2 handfuls of this wondrous stuff. Yes. Now I could be very frugal and cut one of these in half, but I want the ends to be natural, so we'll be a little fancy with it. So the first thing we have to do is tie off there. If you can sort of hold it like that, roughly where my hand is, just so it doesn't move too much. And get that. Actually got to decide where I'll put that one in. Okay. You can let go again for a minute.
Okay.
What we want to do now is probably going to be around here is where we're actually doing the tying.
Okay.
So I wonder if I'm going to need to do a double one. What do you think?
Probably. It's awfully bulky.
Yes, I think it'll be a good idea. So what we do now is actually let's put the tools down out of the way so I don't send them flying, because then I can do it like this, which is a lot easier. And I'm going to do a couple of these, so I'll pull some more of the cable ties out, and they're down here. There we go. Get good and tight. Actually going to... Yeah. Wunderbar. Actually, you know, we might actually work with one because they ended up them right next to each other. So
alright.
I'm going to try a single one. Yeah, I think it will. It never hurts to experiment.
And do you think a single will work better? We could slip the other one off and redo it as a single.
And do another one. And basically what I'm going to do 3 lots of willows, so one there, one there, one there, and I'm going to have cable ties in between each point where I'm going to do that, because that'll keep everything nice and tight. That works really well. You know, I am going to snip that.
Yeah, pruning shears have a secondary use.
Oh, everything in this place is multi-purpose. Can't afford for things to be single use. So all's well so far.
So now how come there's so much space between the top and where we're putting the willow?
Because you don't want your broom to be too long,
Oh,
the
okay.
brush. So we're basically going to trim it to...
Oh, you're going to trim it from that
Yeah.
end? Okay, that's the part I didn't understand.
And one more to put here, and then we're ready to start playing with Willow. Who's a lovely girl, always very convenient, and she's very flexible once you've got her soaking.
Flexible is good.
There we go. So now, we'll take this wonderful stuff. This is where the real thing starts. Can you pass me the copper doohickey? Thank you. Well, actually, hold on to it until I need it.
I feel like a nurse scalpel. Copper doohickey.
Copper doohickey.
Doohickey.
Doohickey. Okay, this is where the fun starts because we need to.
Do you need my hands over there?
We'll do at some point. Whoops.
Oh.
Okay, remember not to do it like that.
Oh, I was going to say, I was just going to take it out of your way.
Let's try another one. If you can hold on to that piece. This is the fun part. You can probably let go of it now.
I feel you, so.
Now the copper pipe is wiggedied in there, which enables me.
I'll have to put it through. I see. Oh,
Can you put where my finger is? I need pressure on there so it doesn't move, because that way I can get my hand free to wiggle it round a bit. Put it next to there. The downside of the cable ties is the end of the withies keep catching.
Mm-hmm.
But where there's a way, there's a way.
Does that shrink a bit when it dries?
Yes, it does. I'm going to see if I can wiggle it in there. And it's going to loosen up when I take the cable ties off, but then we're going to shove the stick in at the end as well. And I'm
How do you
going
get the stick in there?
that's why it has a point on the stick. And
Do we want to tuck this in or no?
I'm just going to trim that off.
Okay.
So that's the first one.
Yay!
If you hold on to that again.
Mm-hmm.
And we repeat as before. What fun.
It's an adventure.
It is. And do you know that there's only one person in the whole of the United States who makes brooms this way? And even he uses wire instead of willow.
Do you want me to pull on that other piece or is it not just in my thumb?
That's great, that's great. We get this positioned and now you can pull on the loose at the end piece. I can do the funky crossover thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now there are ways of doing this very neatly and prettily. If you're into basket weaving, you'll probably know all sorts of wonderful ways of doing this. I don't, so I'm just doing it so that it holds. I'm not really worried about the aesthetics of it beyond the natural aesthetics of the fact I'm using the appropriate substance.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go again with the pipe. I'm just going to tilt that forward
I was going to say, turn that towards the camera.
so that we can see what's going on. And once again, the joy is in the... You want to put your finger on there again? That's it. That gives me the freedom. The freedom! There we go. That's alright, it didn't break all the way through. So I'll trim that and I'll just do an extra one.
Okay.
Just to make sure. Lovely. This time just for variety and sheer bloody mindedness. Tuck that one under there. I tell you, doing a traditional broom squire would make a broom approximately every 10 minutes.
Wow.
Doing this all day must have really strong thumbs. Let's pull this out.
Right. Yeah, it looks like it is. Yeah.
That's all right, the rest of it isn't.
Okay.
It'll dry and stiffen
Right.
and take care of itself like that. And if necessary, I can always redo it. Ooh, smashed myself. Okay. See, children, it always helps when you have people to help you because you have extra pairs of hands, which stops you ending up looking like a total idiot because you can't keep hold of everything.
What is it?
Yeah, no, I wanted to pull that one too
Oh.
because I saw it was sitting loose. The trick here is to get it under the willow but not under any of the birch.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to turn it round a bit and find a better spot. Because that area, I just couldn't stop it from going under the birch. And here we go, you want to put your finger on there.
Ah, sorry. Slippery stuff.
Yep. Ow! Sharp stuff as well. I just got a birch splinter in my palm of my hand.
No doubt there's always a low blood involved.
Yeah, well, yeah, the powers that be must take their offering. Actually doesn't take that long.
So far so good.
Whew. And that one. point where we roar in triumph or we look very embarrassed. Oh, it looks like it holds. So
Yeah.
the next thing I have to do is give this end a haircut.
My butt is.
Now I may actually have to take a saw to this because
I'm gonna have to.
yeah, I think I'm going to have to take a saw to this. Okay, so we've got the basic bristle of the besom. And the next thing we've got to do is put the shaft in. So there's a nice piece of ash, which I've already cut to length and put a point on, because what we're going to do with this is we're going to situate it in the middle, and we're going to and voici et voila, we have achieved broom.
No chance that's gonna come out, right?
No. As the willow dries, it will tighten down on it a little, but it's actually pretty firmly in there.
Good.
And there we have one traditional witch's broom made with all the traditional materials and made more or less in the traditional way. Gathered here today, and here she is, that very same besom. I made this 8 years ago. That's when that video was made. My lovely assistant Karen was the guardian of our coven. She died a year later of breast cancer, not because of the besom, obviously, but it's nice to see her smiling face again. She was always an inspiration and a very fun person to interact with. But this is it. This is the self-same broom, and the symbolism is fairly straightforward. I mentioned some of it while I was making it, obviously, but first of all you have the three feminine woods. You have the ash, the birch and the willow, and that might lead you to think that, oh, a besom is a feminine tool, and no, it isn't. Men can sweep the floor too. It's not just for women anymore. As you saw in the video, the end of the ash that gets rammed forcefully into the brush is pointed, and sometimes we get a little carried away and we actually carve it as a phallus, because the symbolism of the besom is actually the male and the female conjoined. The staff is the male and the brush is the female. And also that is why there's this huge argument about when you're flying on a broomstick, should you fly handle forward or brush forward? And of course, when you realise that there's actually a phallus tucked away in there, you want to be flying phallus forward. I'm sorry. I've never thought of flying phallus forward before, and it tickled me. But you'll find garden centres in the UK will still sell birch besoms because they are actually the most efficient thing for sweeping leaves off the grass, and they usually use baling wire instead of the willow because it's cheaper and quicker. But you'll find that besoms that are made for mundane use normally just have two bindings, whether it's of willow or of wire. The three lets you know that it is for special purposes, and the symbolism is fairly straightforward. I think it's the idea of the male and the female conjoined. It's also the concept of flying on your broomstick. There's several ways in which that is used magically. There was an old tradition in Britain of you would ride your besom like a hobby horse around the perimeter of your fields, jumping high with it between your legs. The idea being that as high as you jumped, that's how high the crops would grow. So it was to encourage the crops to grow, a piece of sympathetic magic. There is also, of course, the flying on your broomstick to the grand Sabbat that we've already spoken about with Walpurgisnacht and the ride to Benevento. And the besom is used in a very particular way for that particular exercise, because obviously we're not talking about physically riding, we're not all playing Quidditch here. And basically the ride to the grand Sabbat was an astral exercise. You did it in your dreams, and one of the classic ways of doing that was to prepare your baby. Sorry, can't believe I did that. To prepare your flying ointment that is not made from baby fat. Oh, I'm going to get so many irate letters from this. You prepare your flying ointment, and the flying ointment is an interesting thing. I'll talk about it very briefly, but I would recommend that unless you really know what you're doing, or you are being trained by somebody who really knows what they're doing, that you don't mess with flying ointment, because you can get yourself into a right pickle with it. Because flying ointment has several active ingredients, and the reason that it works is that these various substances, which are all toxic, they will all kill you, happen to be the antidote for each other. It's like substance A is the antidote for substance B, which is the antidote for substance C, which is the antidote for substance D, which is the antidote for substance A. And so you get them in the right mix, and it's not just the right mix to interact with each other, but the right mix for your body weight, body type, metabolism. It's quite a scientific endeavour. They cancel out the negative effects, and you just get to astral project like a bugger. It's really strong hallucinogenic is basically what you end up with. However, you get the mix wrong, it ends up being a one-way trip. So, important safety tip. And the best way to absorb flying ointment, it's a topical application, and you can apply substances like that to your pulse points, like where you put your perfume, on your wrist, behind your ear, behind your knees actually is another good place. But it's particularly quickly absorbed by mucous membranes. Now you could shove it up your nose, but there's always the danger you might get some in your mouth, and you do not want to ingest it because you'll be dead straight away then. Not a good idea. Those mucous membranes, verboten. But the traditional way was, as you've seen from all the woodcuts and the paintings of the witches of Walpurgisnacht, they have a tendency to ride their brooms naked. Now, whether this is to avoid getting their clothing snagged, or because it was the fashion of the day, because, I mean, you've got to imagine flying through the night, even in May, in Northern Europe, is going to be a pretty chilly affair. Maybe they just like to have the full headlights going. But they would be riding the besom naked. Of course, the real reason that they're depicted naked is because they're at home in their bedrooms. And you would smear the flying ointment on the handle of your broom, and as you rode it, it would rub up and down on the mucous membranes of your tender bits. Obviously, for the women, this is a little easier. For the men, I would imagine a certain accommodation was required. Which is probably why men would often ride stangs. It was like the early witchy version of the monkey bar handlebars on the bikers have on their motorbikes. But yeah, so you basically rub your tender bits on the shaft of the besom and get the flying ointment in there good and proper, and it sends you doolally and sends you off to the grand Sabbat. And needless to say, you probably want one that's got the bark removed, because this is quite rough, and I imagine you get chafed quite a bit trying to ride this one in that manner. Not to mention there's some little knobbly bits, so you probably want smooth handle for that. And but it's a very interesting exercise. And there's a lot of other things that besom are used for. They are used for sweeping the ritual space, for cleansing it, in much the same way as you'd use one for sweeping the floor for any other purpose. But the aim is not to get rid of the dust and debris, but to get rid of the demons and and diabolical doodads. And it can be used for cleansing in other ways. It can be used for brushing negative attachments from people, and it can be used as a staff, as a wand, as a badge of office. But mostly it is very much a symbol of witchiness, and one of the more common uses for the besom is that when you are busy crafting, you stand it outside next to your front door, leaning against the doorpost, to let people know that you are busy and to come back later. Traditionally, a birch besom, you do not lean bristles down because it puts a permanent kink on the bristles. So you always have it bush up, which also maintains the male-female symbolism quite nicely as well. So that's pretty much it. Probably the most famous use of the besom, other than riding to the ground Sabbath upon it, is the jumping over it at hand fastings. A practice which was adopted by the slaves in America, to the point these days where African American families often still incorporate jumping the broom in their wedding ceremonies. And so do we, because it's fun. And a lot of people don't really do a lot with the broom. They have it because they feel they have to, because they're witchy, and they don't really do a lot with it. A lot of people, and this is something that I find absolutely horrifying, use broomcorn brooms. And what's the symbolism of a broomcorn? It's like, it's just, why not use a vacuum cleaner or a synthetic bristle brush? I guess I'm just old-fashioned. This is the only witch's broomstick for me, and you can keep your broomcorn ones. They're great for sweeping the yard and the kitchen, but this is what I want in ritual and when I'm riding up to the top of the mountain. So that's it for this week. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're a little bit wiser in the ways of the besom. And now, if I'd had more wits about me, I would have prepared. I have some wonderful photographs that were taken in Salem a couple of years ago during the Pagan Supermoot that we held there, where we all went to a vintage photography place and got dressed up as witches and wizards with our broomsticks, and we did some wonderful photographs, and I really should have included a couple of those to finish this podcast off with. Maybe I'll repost them on Facebook for the viewing pleasure of crazy people like me. So thank you very much, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll look forward to joining you again next time. Take care now.
By a bent line, by a straight line, by a crooked line. The Crooked Path, a podcast for modern cunning folk with Peter Pagan. By a bent line, by a straight line, by a crooked line. The Crooked